Thank you. Thank you. All right, what a crowd. Thank you, USC. Thank you, Lyric, and thanks to all of you for sharing this sunny day with us. I'm looking forward to a conversation about how we can make this country a better place, how we can get this country on the right track, because 4 more years of this and we're not going to recognize this republic of ours. We have a chance to do something different. We have a chance to respond to the urgency of the moment that we are living in right now. But that means recognizing that this is about even more than just how to get a new president. This is about how we fix the conditions that allowed this president to take over the Republican Party and get anywhere near the Oval Office to begin with, because that doesn't happen under ordinary circumstances.
Yeah.
Now, the idea of my campaign is that we're going to have to do 2 things. We're going to have to put forward bold enough solutions to deal with the problems that have gotten our country here, and we're going to have to do it in a way that unifies the American people. Now, the problem is, right now, we're being sold a story that you got to pick one or the other. Either we're going to be bold and move forward and have big ideas, or we can bring people together, but we got to choose one. I'm here to tell you, stay with me on this, that not only is it possible, it is fundamentally necessary that we do both of those things.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally necessary that we have bolder answers, because there is no going back to the old normal. We are where we are because normal didn't work. We definitely saw that in the industrial Midwest where I live. Right now, we got a gross domestic product going up and life expectancy going down at the same time. That shouldn't even be possible. But that's where we are. We have seen inaction on gun safety to where, when I was in high school, the Columbine shooting happened and we said never again. And 20 years later, we're still arguing about why we are the only developed country in the world where this happens all the time.
Yeah.
And we're still there. Climate change has gone from a theory to a prediction to an observation to a reality to an emergency, and we're still arguing over how to deal with it. So there is no question that we need bold action in order to move our country forward. But here's the other side of the coin. We also need to bring the American people together, because we are dangerously divided. We are discouraged. We are depressed. We are doubtful at the very moment when we got to come together and figure out these solutions. I don't believe we can unify the American people unless we have answers big enough to meet the challenge of our time. I also don't believe we can meet the challenge of our time if the American people are getting divided. If we're this close to solving the problem of climate change, or at least beginning to take action, and they got us talking about cheeseburgers and straws. If we are seeing the signs that our economy is about to go off a cliff, and they get us arguing over whether to buy Greenland.
Yeah.
This is not the way forward for our country. In order to unify, we've got to do it around our values. Now, the problem is we are being divided around the very values that are supposed to bring us together as a country. Think about it. Like, they talk about patriotism, right? And I've been thinking a lot about patriotism this week, because this is the 5-year anniversary of when I came home from Afghanistan. And let me tell you what patriotism means to me. It means that the American flag, the flag that was attached to my shoulder when I was in uniform, symbolizes that we all have an obligation to speak up when our leaders do something wrong, and when they do, we can expect better than to be told to go back to where we came from.
Yeah.
Especially where he came from is Michigan. Keeping America safe is going to take a lot more than hugging a flag. Keeping America safe means standing up to the real threats of our time: cybersecurity, election security. It means standing up to white nationalist violence before it takes one more life in this country. And yes, it means making sure that the Second Amendment can never again be distorted into an excuse for inaction when gun violence is claiming lives in this country every single day. That's national security too. 21st century national security is going to take a lot more than a 17th century security technology like putting up a wall along the southern border. It's not going to be that easy. They talk about faith, but tell me what faith would condone a budget that cuts food going into the mouths of hungry children in this country.
Yeah.
Tell me what faith would condone tearing children out of the arms of their parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was hungry and you did not feed me. I was a stranger and you did not welcome me. Now, we are a party that respects the idea that you should be supported whether you are from any religion or no religion. You should be supported equally by the President of the United States and anybody running for office. But now's a good time to remind those who are guided by faith that they have a choice, because every faith tradition I've ever heard of tells us that we are supposed to support those who are marginalized and seek out leaders who walk in the way of humility and decency, and that means something very different than what we got going on right now in Washington. They speak of freedom, but I don't think you're free if you are under a six-figure load of student debt when you're just starting out your career. I don't think you're free if you are finding that your reproductive health care rights as a woman are being dictated by male politicians in Boston. We can deliver freedom all right, but freedom's going to require something a little different. So this is the presidency I'm asking you to picture. This is the presidency I am seeking to create. It's one that gathers Americans to take bold action to deal with these problems, to take the bold action required to actually tackle climate change before it tackles us, to implement something like the Douglas Plan that I have proposed, as ambitious as the Marshall Plan that rebuilt Europe, but this time investing here at home to tackle systemic racism before it undoes the entire American project. I want you to picture an America where the Secretary of Education actually believes in public education. And I want to picture a White House where when you turn on the TV and you see the President of the United States, your blood pressure goes down a little bit instead of up a little bit. We could do that. But in order to do any of that, first, we're going to have to win. And so I want to ask you to picture not just the kind of president I would be to serve you as the American people, but the kind of nominee I would be in order to make sure this happens. When I am your nominee, this president will do what he'll do no matter what, which is go on and on about socialism. But I got started in the private sector, and I worked with the private sector to create jobs and investment in my hometown, because that's what a mayor does. This president's going to go on and on about the swamp. Never mind that it's never been swampier than it is today. But I didn't come from Washington. I come from northern Indiana, working as a mayor hundreds of miles away, actually delivering for the people that I serve.
Yes.
This president's going to talk about military parades. He's going to throw himself. I'm not worried about that. Because when he does, I will remind him that while he was getting ready to go on season 7 of Celebrity Apprentice, I was here in South Carolina getting ready to go to Afghanistan. Never forget that every time my party, the Democratic Party, has won, it has been because we have put forward somebody from outside the establishment with a new kind of message from a different generation. And every time we have tried to do the reverse, gone with the safe choice, the Washington choice, every single time in the last 50 years we have come up short. So you see, the most dangerous thing we could do politically is to try too hard to play it safe.
Yes.
Then nobody's inspired. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of a sense of what I'm doing, how we're doing it, what I believe, and what kind of president I would be. But I didn't come here just to talk at you in a monologue. I think we ought to make sure that we're responding to questions that have come from the folks who are here. So please welcome Lyric back to the stage with the famous fishbowl, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation.
All right, so all of these questions are from students. Okay. Here in South Carolina, it's legal to be fired for your orientation. I'm assuming you mean sexual. Do you have plans to address this when you're president?
I do. Is our questioner here? You want to give us a wave? If not, no worries. Oh, hi. Thanks for coming. So, unfortunately, I live in a state where this is the case as well. You could get married on Sunday, and on Monday you could get fired just because of who you are. You know, what's amazing is the progress of change in this country. Because when this decade began, I was pretty certain that, well, I knew as a matter of law that I couldn't serve in the military and be who I was. It was a matter of law that I was to be fired if I were to get married or be out. It was also an unwritten law in Indiana politics that you could either be in office or you could be out, not both. And now, I'm standing in front of you as a presidential candidate with, I'd say, a pretty good shot to win. And my husband is out campaigning for me right now. But as you've reminded us, we are not there yet when it comes to equality. And we cannot continue to go on in a country where you can be fired because of who you are or because of who you love. Not just fired, but subjected to discrimination in housing, in employment, in access to services. There's something we can do about that. It's called the Equality Act. There's a federal Equality Act. It's already been drafted in the House. It's one of many very good pieces of legislation that the House has created. They're going to Mitch McConnell's Senate to die there. But let me tell you, when that bill gets to my desk, I will sign it right away, and discrimination will be illegal in this country from coast to coast.
So the next one is, with the current violence against trans individuals, what policies will you put in place to protect us and our rights? And that question was from Olivia Rivera.
Right. And say hi if you want to, Olivia. I don't, oh, okay. Hi, thanks for coming. So, first of all, again, the Equality Act. The Equality Act will see to it that you cannot be mistreated because of who you are. We also know that the violence against trans women that is going on in this country has reached a frightening and unacceptable level. And in addition to the laws I want to sign, I just want you to know that we're trying to build a culture where everybody belongs. See, right now, we've set it up to where the White House, from the White House on down, we're telling different people they don't belong. You don't belong because of how you look. You don't belong because of your politics. You don't belong because of your gender identity. And as a country, we're just not going to make it that way. It's not going to work. This is one country. And to meet some of the challenges in front of us, from tackling climate change to delivering an economy that's going to work, we're going to have to pull together. And so in our moral leadership, as well as in our legal policies, we have to see to it that everybody knows where they fit in. Everybody. And that's my promise to you as an American.
So the next one is, what is your plan to protect abortion rights throughout the nation?
All right. So, this questioner want to say hi? Hello, thanks for coming. Abortion rights are under attack right now. I come from Indiana. I am a pro-choice Democrat governing in South Bend, Indiana, conservative place, especially socially. And I understand people I respect, people I love, think about this differently than I do. But at the end of the day, without having to convince everybody else that they have to agree with me on where you draw the line, I think the most important thing we can agree on, or should agree on, is who gets to draw the line. And to me, that is the woman who is facing the decision. And that will guide our life. For that reason, I will appoint judges and justices who understand that this is part of American freedom. As an executive, I will overturn things like the Title X gag rule that prevent providers from giving good medical advice to the people they serve. And I will seek legislation that enshrines Roe v. Wade as a matter of law, because there is an American majority, and you wouldn't know it from watching cable, but even a majority of Republicans support Roe versus Wade. So the attacks on it are coming from a pretty extreme place. We've got to gather together the American majority that believes that no matter what you think about some of the profound moral questions at stake, we can agree that these decisions will not be made better medically or morally if they are being dictated by the government instead of by the woman who faces the decision.
Yes.
So the next one is, how do you plan to reduce prescription costs? As a home health nurse and daughter to parents on MCR, this is important to me.
Thank you. Are you here? Thank you. And thanks for your work taking care of others. It looks to me like you got your hands full taking care of your own family. So there's a lot of care going on in your life. And hi. And you should be supported. And we should support your profession. Now, when it comes to prescription drugs, they're increasingly out of reach, even for people who do have insurance. This is one of the problems, and so we got to go beyond just making sure there's insurance. That's what's in my Medicare for All Who Want It vision, which is that we ought to create a public alternative. Anybody who wants health insurance through this public alternative can get it. If I'm right, and it's better than the private plans, and everybody will choose it, and it'll lead us to Medicare for all. But instead of me assuming I'm right and imposing that on everybody, I'm going to let people figure that out for themselves. So we're not going to kick you off the private plan.
Yeah.
We're going to invite you to the public one if you want it. As part of that plan, there will be a cap on out-of-pocket expenses because we have got to make sure that these medication costs don't destroy families. And we've got to confront price gouging by drug companies. Look, if you think up some wonder drug, I want you to be rewarded for that. That's great. But what we see right now is a lot of companies that are deliberately keeping drugs scarce so that they can jack up the prices. That is not fair, it is not right, and my administration will enforce against drug companies who do that. Third, we need to empower the federal government to be able to negotiate drug prices. This is pretty basic. Most Americans want it, but once again, this Senate and this White House will not deliver because there's some very powerful interests that don't want to see it happen. When I'm president, we're going to make sure it happens because it will actually improve the federal budget deficit, and more importantly, it will improve the lives of millions of Americans who need to be able to afford their prescription drugs. And thank you.
This one is, what exactly does your Douglas plan entail, and how will you work on gaining the trust of Black voters?
Excellent question. A questioner here? All right, you prefer to stay anonymous or had to go to class. But so the idea of the Douglas plan is that just deleting a racist policy and replacing it with a neutral one is not enough to deliver equality. We know that because we are at a time when generational theft and systemic racism have created two different Americas. Right now, a Black woman is 3 times as likely to die in childbirth as a white woman. Right now, an identical resume is less likely to be called back for a job application if the name on it is stereotypically Black than if the name is stereotypically white. We are a long way from conquering racial inequality in this country. Now, the idea of the Douglas plan is that you can't take any one piece of this alone. For example, we know that there is tremendous racial inequality in our criminal justice system. There's no question about that. And it is impacting every part of American life. We are the most incarcerated country in the world. I am proposing we cut incarceration by half, and that we take steps to make sure that there is greater accountability and justice in policing, because in our own community, we are struggling with the wall of mistrust between the Black community and law enforcement, even though each needs the other in order to thrive. But let us not reduce the Black experience in this country to encounters with the criminal justice system. For every minute we spend talking about that, let's also be talking about entrepreneurship and economic empowerment and what it's going to take to lift up people who have been historically excluded from economic success in this country. It's why I'm proposing we set at 25% the level that the federal government does business with historically disadvantaged owners. It's the reason why I'm insisting that we co-invest in businesses to build them up. We need to lift up the entrepreneurial energy of an entire generation of Black Americans who have a proven record of being able to employ others and grow our economy. And just as you can't talk criminal justice without talking economic empowerment, we can't talk about economics without talking about education, which is why we need to invest in HBCUs. And we can't really get at this issue without also talking about health and housing. And by the way, health and housing are related. In our own community, a lot of families, mostly low-income and largely Black families, are suffering from lead poisoning, not because of the water. I guarantee the water is good. It's because of the houses. And many of the neighborhoods they were redlined into are the ones where the paint in the houses is poisoning the children, which is why I'm proposing a 21st Homestead Act that helps families stay in redlined neighborhoods that now they're starting to get gentrified out of, and resources in order to help make sure those houses are safe. It's why we need a health equity strategy. And above all, to make any of this happen, we need a 21st Century Voting Rights Act that puts an end to racial systemic voter suppression that is going on and giving all of us worse political outcomes. All of this is connected.
What plan do you have to get the Republicans in Congress to work towards gun control laws?
So, here's the thing. The majority of the American people are with us right now. I had a 13-year-old come to an event of mine recently and ask what we're going to do about gun safety, and tears were streaming down his face. Because he is going into class wondering if he's going to be safe. Maybe some of you are wondering if you're safe in class. It is the last thing you should be thinking about. You got more than enough to figure out getting through class, getting through college, than your physical safety. And yet, here we are. We've had the same conversation for about 25 years. Right now, more than 90% of Americans, including the vast majority of Republicans and the vast majority of gun owners, are for common sense gun laws. They're for universal background checks. So popular, even the president briefly pretended to be for them. Red flag laws, ways to disarm domestic abusers and identify when somebody is dangerous to themselves or others. And doing something to make sure that the kinds of weapons of war that I trained on and saw in a war zone have no place in American streets and neighborhoods or anywhere near a school in peacetime in our country. We should be able to deliver that now. So to the question itself, which is about getting the congressional GOP to do it, the question is, are they willing to listen to voters, or are they going to listen to an interest group that doesn't even speak for gun owners anymore, just gun company executives? And we're going to find out where their loyalties really are. Now, again, the president and even Mitch McConnell have tried to talk both sides of their mouth, right? We're going to see whether they mean business. I am skeptical. I am highly doubtful that they're going to do anything. So we're just going to have to vote them out. And that's the best strategy. Look, I think that we can make a lot of progress with the Senate if we rely on the fact that the American people with us, remember, there's a strong American majority in favor of choice, in favor of higher minimum wage, in favor of immigration reform, in favor of gun safety reform, in favor of doing something about climate. The American people are with us. And I think the best thing you can do with that big airplane that comes with the Oval Office is fly it into the home state of a senator getting in the way of progress and remind them just how out of step they are with their own voters. But that's the second best answer for how to deal with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. The best answer is to see to it that he's not the majority leader anymore. And that's why you might want a candidate with coattails from the middle of the country who can help win the Senate, too.
So this one says, you say that America needs to end the endless wars. Do you believe that America should practice isolationism or lean towards being the police officers of the rest of the world?
Great question. You here? All right. I don't think either one of those is the right direction. I don't think isolationism works because we're seeing what happens in the absence of American leadership. See, with America abandoning its leadership role, you see what's going on in Hong Kong, you see the detention of the Uyghurs, you see the way Saudi Arabia has been acting, including murdering an American resident. You see countries around the world, not to mention what Russia obviously is doing. You see these dictatorships throwing their weight around because they think they can, because they don't think we'll do anything about it. And under this president, they just might be right. So we can't just withdraw from the rest of the world. But that doesn't mean we have to go around invading people either. We have diplomatic, economic, cyber and information and other tools at our disposal to do everything we need to do, from lift up the aspirations of people seeking democracy around the world to protecting our country from something like another attack on our elections. We can do that without indefinite commitments of ground troops. Look, when I left Afghanistan years ago, I thought I was one of the last guys there, turning out the lights on the way out. And we're still there. Of course, we need to see to it that there can never be another attack on the homeland from that country. We can do it without indefinitely committing thousands and thousands of ground troops to be on the ground in that country forever.
How do you plan to fight climate change, and what will you do in the first 100 days?
Great question. Is that you? All right. Thanks for coming. So we got to get to work on this immediately. We should have been working on this 20 years ago. And we have just run out of time to have a debate over whether it's real. I wish we were having a debate between the Republican plan to get us to a carbon neutral economy and the Democratic plan and argue over who's better. But instead we're having an argument over whether we should bother. Well, we're out of time. In my city, we have had 2,000-year, 500-year to 1,000-year rainfalls, less than 2 years apart. I had to activate the Emergency Operations Center and do incident command twice for something that's supposed to happen once in a millennium. So we know that this is, and it's been predicted. So here's the thing. I've got a plan that by 2025 will double American clean energy. By 2030 and 35 we'll be moving light vehicles and then eventually heavy vehicles off of carbon, and by 2050 gets us to a net neutral economy. Now, everybody's got a plan. And everybody's plan is pretty good. The real question, though, is who has a plan that can actually get done? See, part of the problem with climate is we're clubbing a bunch of people over the head, telling them they're the problem. And just as a matter of basic human psychology, that makes it harder for them to get on board. I think that, for example, rural America and agriculture could be a huge part of the solution. Soil management, cover crops, sustainable farming could be as big a symbol of how we beat the climate crisis as an electric vehicle. But that means we have to not just pressure or encourage farmers to do it, we should pay them to do it. If the Trump administration can find billions of dollars to pay farmers to not sell their crops to China, then I'm pretty sure we can find the funding to incentivize farmers to adopt more sustainable farming practices. So with rural America playing a role, cities and towns playing a role, the military playing a huge role as the biggest buyer of fossil fuels, and that means they could be the biggest buyer of biofuels and one of the biggest adopters of clean technologies. In addition to the R&D, in addition to the carbon tax and dividend we got to do, and the way I would do it is I'd rebate it right back out to the American people, so it makes us whole. In addition to everything I've talked about on the energy side, the biggest thing is we need this to be a national project. We need this to be like the moon landing or dealing with the Great Depression or World War II, something that makes us stand up taller and proud that we did something about it. And if we do, then we can lead the rest of the world, because we can't get it done without the rest of the world. But let's be real. The rest of the world can't get it done without American leadership. And so climate diplomacy has to be core to our international strategy from now on.
All right, so last one, but certainly not least. What will you do to reduce student loan debt?
Right. I can tell this is your question. Or thanks for coming. This one's pretty personal for us. We got 6-figure student loan debt, and it is limiting the possibilities and the opportunities for so many Americans. There's some things we can do right away. First of all, we got to make college more affordable on the front end. That means expanding Pell Grants, and this time let's have them be eligible for living expenses, not just tuition, because often that's one of the things that's causing people to take on so much debt. And let's peg it to inflation so you don't have to go back to Congress every time. Another thing we've got to do is work with states to make sure not so much of the tuition burden goes on the student. But there's also things I think we can do on the back end. We can make sure that it is more affordable to pay down student debt. And I envision a program of public service loan forgiveness. There's one on the books now, but it's almost impossible to use. It's really hard. Maybe you've looked into it. Only certain loans qualify. You got to hit every payment for 10 years. I propose that we reform that to make it much more generous and much more useful. And I believe we need a national service program, 1 million paid volunteer service opportunities that also help contribute toward that program and contribute toward reducing your debt. That has all kinds of benefits, not just the debt reduction, but what it means for the work experience that people can get, and the actual projects you can do, which would range from helping people dealing with addiction to helping us get ready for climate change. And maybe the best part of all, just getting to know people who are different from you. You know, when people got into my vehicle overseas, they had different backgrounds, definitely different politics, but we trust each other with our lives. I want everybody to have that same opportunity without having to go to war to get there. And I think a national service program can do that, in addition to helping with things like student debt load. Let's give one more big thank you to Lyric for moderating our voice. And a big thanks to everybody who's here. Look, I know that hope is kind of unfashionable now in politics, but the biggest thing I'm asking you to do is spread a sense of hope that we can get something done in our political process. Because running for office fundamentally is an act of hope. We only do it if you think it's worth taking hold of the pulleys and levers of our government and using them to make something better. And if they're broken, rearranging them and fixing them too. And I'm asking more than anything if I can look to you to be in that spirit of hope. Because I want us to be able, 10 years from now, to be proud of what we did in 2020. And I think we will. I think we can. If and only if we take the steps that are needed right now. So can I look to you to spread that spirit of hope around this campus and around the country? And can I count on you to ignore this president's reality show, pick up the remote, and change the channel to something better? And do you believe that our lifetimes could be the best years America has yet seen? then if you're ready to spread that message and if you're ready to support this vision, you will bring me to the nomination and put me in the White House, and I will help to bring you a new era in American life. Thank you for being here, and I will see you on the campaign trail. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.